Hello, my name is Eric Araujo Sosa, and today I'll be presenting my solution for one of the challenges of globalization. This is my second evidence for the geocultural challenges of globalization class. Well, as my chosen challenge of globalization, I picked worker exploitation. Why? Well, because worker exploitation is something I see every day. It happens not only in my country, but it happens in several others far from here. And I think it's a serious issue in globalization, which is actually caused by globalization, by the large or the enormous growth of some companies and their need to meet a demand for their products. And so, well, I made some research, and hundreds of companies in developed countries outsource their product manufacturing to workers in less developed ones because of their cheaper labor, which has led to high degrees of exploitation. This worker exploitation includes, but is not limited to, inhumane working conditions. This is basically like working in dirty spaces without the proper health restrictions or sanitization. It also includes disproportionate work hours, which may mean like 50 work hours per week or even more, maybe 60, basically exhausting their workers, and minimum salaries, which means that people don't get enough to meet their needs. They don't get enough to pay rent, they don't get enough to pay money to cover for their families. All of this is encompassed in worker exploitation. Let's get to the facts and figures, the statistics, which are sourced from the International Labour Organization, which released a document in 2017, which kind of like compiled a little bit of these stats. According to them, an estimated 27.6 million people were trapped in modern slavery, with 17.3 million of them working for the private sector. This means that 17.3 million of people work for large companies which outsource their work. The rest actually work for like maybe local companies or the government even, but that's how it is. Then the ILO basically says that the Asian and Pacific region has the highest number of people in forced labor, approximately 15.1 million people, which amounts to half of them. That's pretty much a lot. And well, the ILO also says that 12% of all those in forced labor are children, more than half of which are in commercial sexual exploitation. This is pretty much horrendous, and that's how thing is. I also want to mention that this 27.6 million stat only refers to forced labor. That means that there are other people living in modern slavery, but they aren't considered under this forced labor label. So the problem is bigger than even the statistics can relate. Let's get to the geocultural analysis of the issue. First of all, we have the places and ethnicities. In the statistics of how many people per country there are working in forced labor, we see India at number 1. India has 7 million, almost 8 million people working in forced labor. Then you have China, which is pretty much cut by half. That's when the statistic has like a big jump. Then in third place is Pakistan with 2 million, North Korea with 2 million as well, and Nigeria with 1.5 million almost. What does this tell us? This tells us that most of the forced labor or worker exploitation is taking place in the Asian and Pacific region, like the ILO stated before. And, there's also something I want to highlight here, and it is that India and China hold the first and second place in worker exploitation. And I think it has to do a lot with how densely populated they are. So there are a lot of people living in India and there are a lot of people living in China. They are pretty much two of the largest, more densely populated countries in the world, because India is not that large. But this tells us that in those two countries specifically, where there lives a lot of people, there isn't also enough work. And if there is work, it is low pay. So there's not enough work for all people in the country. There comes these large companies who says, hey, we have work, but you get low pay. This is actually sort of like not only a consequence of globalization, but also a consequence of how densely populated or overpopulated our world is. And on the other side of the geocultural analysis, we have the power dynamics. And well, it's clear to see that in the power dynamics game that is shown in worker exploitation, large companies hold all power over the citizens and the workers. They are pretty much those who dictate what happens, who gets what, and how are they paid, what are the rules. And this is basically telling us that workers in third world countries or developing countries, let's say, are at a disadvantage when facing these large companies from developed countries. We have a lot of money, we have a lot of power, a lot of influence, and basically lead the manufacturing industry. What is my proposal to solve this issue? Well, I propose that we need to enforce international standards for workers around the globe, so that all businesses or companies with such a demand for product manufacturing are forced to become sustainable, affordable, and most importantly, ethical. Why do I mention our manufacturing companies? Well, it's mostly manufacturing companies of all types: the fashion industry, the beauty industry, that's also the electronic components industry, let's say. So it's pretty much all factories, let's say. Okay. And what's my objective for this proposal? Well, first of all, I want to halt the increasing percentage of people who find themselves in forced labor. Let's stop that statistic for now. That'll be our short-term goal, like our immediate goal. And then I'll be trying to maintain the benefits that outsourced labor has on developing countries, which is basically just the injection of capital or money into these developing countries, and well, the people who need work getting work and getting paid. That's the other benefit, sort of. And well, in the long run, sort of like let's say long distance goal, I would like to cut by half the population will find themselves in forced labor. Ideally, we will like to eradicate them, but that's not as simple, so I try to go for a more realistic goal for now. So what is my plan to implement this? Well, first of all, I want to propose a global analysis. Let's say we need to gather more information, more statistics to make this all the most convincing it can be, to make sure that our voices and the voices of the workers are heard. Then we held a global convention, get together of many countries wish to act against modern slavery and forced labor. Let's see this as sort of like a reunion by the United Nations, let's say. And then there's the law proposition, the process in which all of these laws against forced labor are created. And well, in the end, there comes the intervention, the actual enforcement of the laws, which will have to fall back on law enforcement, I think. There's kind of like no other ways. Well, there's also legal systems, but those haven't been working well for a while. So I think it needs a combination of both the legal or the theoretical part of the laws and the physical or enforcement part of the laws. Let's get to the stakeholders. First of all, we have large companies, which represent the upper part of the power dynamics, and those with the economic power. They want the most production at the least cost. They are basically in an advantage here. They hold power over the workers. And well, let's talk about the workers. These are workers in developing countries who want or seek ethical working conditions, fair remuneration, and let's say just proper work. And then there's the government and law enforcement, which I think could act as like a sort of mediator between the two, so that maybe companies get the lots of production they're asking, but at a not so cheap labor, and then workers get reduced work hours and more proper working conditions, and their wages are increased also. I think we should not forget that governments of countries are important, are the most important stakeholder here. So while we're talking about stakeholders, which resources do I think we'll need? Well, I think first and foremost, we need a lot of human resources, let's say people who are willing to make a change. People who are willing to propose this set of laws, people who are willing to talk about it, people who are willing to volunteer to donate some money. because that's the other thing. We also will need economic resources. Like, we need to do the whole campaign. We need to actually move some influences here and there, get people where they need to be, and let's have this whole discussion. But those economic resources can be mostly given out by the same countries. And I think we need some infrastructure resources as well. By infrastructure resources, I mean just basically the whole organization thing, the planning of it, the law proposal, and well, I think those are kind of like the main resources we'll need for now, if we want to make this plan happen. So, to conclude, why is it important to consider the cultural aspects of an issue? Well, it's pretty much everything to consider the cultural aspects of an issue. When tackling an issue, we need to look at it from every perspective, to think about every stakeholder, their wants, their needs. We need to have as much information as possible to look from all perspectives in order to take an informed decision. And that informed decision in this globalized world actually means taking a look at different cultures, how they relate to each other, which holds power over each other. And so basically, it's mapping out the whole issue. So let's go to the second question. What role did they play in the planification of your proposal? The role of these geocultural aspects that I had to consider was also everything. Like, I had to take into consideration every single aspect. I didn't only want to favor the workers, even if I think they are at a disadvantage. Let's say I wanted to get to a fair agreement between both of the stakeholders, well, all three stakeholders now. And so, yeah, I think the cultural aspects basically told me how to get to a proposal, how to create a solution for this issue. They're the framework of this whole proposal for a solution. And lastly, what is my role as a professional or as a responsible citizen in a cultural globalized world? Well, I think my responsibility as a global citizen is to try and solve problems, looking at every single culture, to try and be respectful, to try and understand their needs, to be empathetic, to be basically human. I think my responsibility as a global citizen is to try to understand everyone and everything, and try to help this chaotic world full of challenges brought over by the modern globalization, kind of like get to agreements, solutions, work together. I think that is my role. I need to be an active participant in change for the better. I need to, with this information and with this knowledge and this ability I have, I think it is my role and actually my responsibility to try and change the world for the better. And well, that will be all for this presentation. I hope you like it, and thanks.